The Kraxan worship eternal dominion hung in the void like a twisted obsidian dagger, its hull adorned with the battle scars of 1,000 conquests. Supreme Commander Vazix stood at the command center's observation deck, his iridescent scales shifting from deep purple to midnight blue as he studied the holographic projection of a small blue planet. Such a peculiar world, he mused, his secondary eyes narrowing while his primary set remained fixed on the slowly rotating image. And these, humans. They've barely mastered orbital flight. Senior Analyst NexRA cleared her throat, her data tendrils pulsing with information. Supreme Commander, preliminary scans indicate they've achieved limited interplanetary travel within their solar system. They maintain several orbital stations and have established small colonies on their moon and neighboring planet. Vazix waved a clawed hand dismissively. Primitive steps. Have they even discovered quantum fold technology? No, Supreme Commander. Their fastest vessels still rely on chemical propulsion. A low, rumbling laugh echoed through the command center. The sound made junior officers flinch. Vazix's amusement often preceded destruction. Show me their military capabilities. The hologram shifted, displaying Earth's various defense systems, military installations, and spacecraft. Vazix's expression grew increasingly amused as each element was presented. Their most powerful weapons were nuclear devices that would barely scratch a Kraxan destroyer's shields. Their fastest fighters would be outmaneuvered by even the most basic Kraxan scout ship. These humans, Vazix said, testing the foreign word, they fight among themselves constantly, yet they've survived. How fascinating. He leaned forward, studying the patterns of their military bases, the deployment of their forces. They waste resources maintaining separate armies, divided by arbitrary geographical boundaries. True, Supreme Commander, NexRA agreed, though our cultural analysis suggests they're showing increasing signs of global cooperation. Several international space initiatives have. Spare me the sociological analysis, Vazix interrupted. What I see is a species ripe for conquest. Their division makes them weak. Their technology makes them vulnerable. He straightened to his full height, nearly 3 meters of lethal grace. And their resources make them valuable. The bridge crew maintained perfect silence as Vazix paced, his footsteps eerily quiet despite his massive frame. The Kraxan Empire had expanded across 12 galaxies through precisely this kind of opportunity, finding civilizations just developed enough to be useful, but not advanced enough to pose any real threat. Prepare a conquest assessment, he ordered. I want to know exactly how quickly we can subdue this world. He paused, watching as a satellite passed through the holographic display. And send a probe to collect more detailed readings of their defensive capabilities. Something small, something they won't notice. Supreme Commander, a tactical officer spoke up, her scales shifting nervously. Our long-range scans indicate they might have detected our presence at the edge of their system. Vazix's mouth curled into what passed for a smile among his species. Let them see us. Let them know what approaches. Fear can be a useful tool, it often prevents unnecessary resistance. Hours later, Vazix reviewed the probe's findings in his private chambers. The humans had indeed detected the Kraxan presence, and their response was exactly what he had expected: chaos. Their global communication networks buzzed with speculation and fear. Their military forces were mobilizing, but in an uncoordinated fashion. Some nations were already arguing about how to respond. Predictable, he muttered, scrolling through reports of human media coverage. Like watching children squabble. But something caught his eye, a detail in the cultural analysis he had earlier dismissed. Humans had a rich tradition of imagining alien contact. They had spent centuries telling stories about invaders from the stars, and in many of these tales, they emerged victorious against overwhelming odds. For a moment, Vazix felt an unfamiliar sensation, a slight twinge of uncertainty. He dismissed it immediately. Fiction was fiction. Reality was the Kraxan Empire's superior technology, their unified purpose, their millennia of military experience. "Begin the invasion preparations," he commanded through the ship's communication system. "We'll start with a demonstration of power. Target their largest military installations, but avoid major civilian centers for now. We want their infrastructure intact." As the Eternal Dominion's crew began their methodical preparation for conquest, Vazix allowed himself to imagine how this campaign would be recorded in the Empire's chronicles. Another swift victory. Another world added to their domain. Another species learning their place in the cosmic hierarchy. He had no way of knowing that his name would indeed be recorded in history, but not in the way he imagined. The humans, it turned out, had more in common with their fiction than anyone in the Kraxan Empire could have guessed. Their greatest strength lay not in their technology or their military might, but in something the Kraxan had forgotten how to measure. The coming days would teach Vazix a lesson that would reshape the galaxy: never mistake technological inferiority for weakness. By the time he learned this truth, it would be far too late. The first attack came at dawn. Kraxan warships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, their energy shields creating rippling auroras as they breached the thermosphere. Supreme Commander Vazix had chosen Beijing, Moscow, and Washington, D.C. for his initial demonstration of power. The humans would learn that even their mightiest cities could fall in moments. But something unexpected happened in those first crucial minutes. "Supreme Commander," Nexare's voice carried an unusual edge of concern. "The humans, they were waiting for us." Vazix's primary eyes narrowed as he watched the tactical display. Where he had expected panic and disarray, he found preparation. The humans had evacuated their key military installations hours before the Kraxan arrival. Their nuclear submarines had dispersed to predetermined positions across Earth's oceans. Most surprisingly, their primitive orbital defense platforms had been repositioned in a configuration that suggested coordination, global coordination. "Impossible," Vazix muttered. Their governments were arguing amongst themselves merely days ago. "It appears, Supreme Commander, that the threat of our arrival has done something unprecedented. They've unified." The first wave of Kraxan fighters swept down toward the Pentagon, expecting to find a helpless target. Instead, they encountered a web of electromagnetic pulses that played havoc with their targeting systems. It wasn't enough to stop the attack, but it forced the fighters to switch to manual control, something Kraxan pilots rarely practiced, believing their automated system superior. In Moscow, underground bunkers that appeared empty on scans suddenly erupted with experimental plasma weapons, crude by Kraxan standards, but effective enough to pierce the shields of several dropships. The humans had been studying the Kraxan probe, learning, adapting. "These defenses," Vazix growled, "they're new. They developed them in days." "Hours, Supreme Commander," Nexare corrected. "They've been working around the clock since detecting our presence. Their scientists and engineers have been sharing data globally, building upon each other's discoveries at an unprecedented rate." The battle for Beijing proved even more surprising. As Kraxan ground forces deployed, expecting to find evacuated streets, they instead encountered a maze of autonomous drones and repurposed civilian vehicles. The humans had turned their entire urban infrastructure into a weapon. "Fascinating," Nexare murmured, her data tendrils pulsing rapidly. "They're using their inferior technology in ways we never considered. Those autonomous vehicles. They're controlled by their gaming computers, using modified video game interfaces." Vazix slammed his fist into the command console. "Enough. They're still primitive. They're still weak. Launch the second wave. Full orbital bombardment." But as the Kraxan fleet moved to higher attack positions, they encountered another surprise. The humans had launched thousands of small objects into orbit, space debris, according to initial scans. The Kraxan ships ignored them until the first explosive detonations began. The debris was a carefully planned minefield, forcing the massive warships to maneuver in ways that compromised their firing solutions. Their strategic thinking, NextRA observed, it's unlike anything in our records. They're not fighting to win, Supreme Commander. They're fighting to survive, to buy time. Every unconventional tactic, every surprising defense, it's all designed to delay us. To what end? Vasix demanded. They must know they can't defeat us. A junior tactical officer spoke up, her scales shifting to a worried gray. Supreme Commander, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from multiple locations around their planet. They're studying our weapons while we use them. Learning from every shot we fire, every shield impact. Vasix felt that twinge of uncertainty again, stronger now. The humans weren't behaving like any species the Kraxan had encountered before. They didn't break under the demonstration of superior force. They didn't fight according to predictable military doctrine. Instead, they adapted, innovated, and most worryingly, they worked together. Launch the third wave, he commanded, but his voice carried less conviction now. Target their power infrastructure. Let's see how well they innovate in the dark. As the orders were relayed, Vasix watched the tactical displays with all four eyes. Something about this felt wrong. The humans were losing, yes, their cities were burning, their conventional forces were being decimated, but they were smiling. He had accessed their media broadcasts, expecting to see terror and despair. Instead, he saw determination. In laboratories and bunkers around the world, human scientists worked feverishly, their eyes bright with purpose. They were learning. With every passing hour, they understood more about Kraxan technology. With every failed defense, they developed two new approaches. They weren't fighting this war the way the Kraxan expected them to fight it. They were fighting it their way. And as the third wave of attacks began, as human resistance grew more organized and more innovative, Supreme Commander Vasix felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries of conquest: doubt. These humans, these supposedly primitive beings, were writing a new chapter in warfare. The only question was whether the Kraxan Empire would survive to read it. 3 weeks into the invasion, Supreme Commander Vasix faced a situation that defied all Kraxan military doctrine. The humans weren't just surviving, they were evolving. In a heavily fortified laboratory beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Sarah Chen held up a twisted piece of Kraxan technology salvaged from a downed fighter. "Look at how they modulate their shield frequencies," she said to colleagues joining virtually from across the globe. "It's not just advanced, it's inefficient. They've relied on brute force because they've never needed finesse." Similar breakthroughs were happening everywhere. In Bangalore, engineers had already reverse-engineered portions of Kraxan communication systems. In Lagos, a team of quantum physicists had identified the fundamental principles behind their FTL drives. Every piece of wreckage, every damaged ship, every failed Kraxan weapon became a learning opportunity. Supreme Commander, NextRA reported, her usual confidence shaken. Human resistance has increased by 300% in the past 72 hours. They're adapting our own technology against us. Vasix watched as another Kraxan destroyer fell from orbit, its shield supposedly impenetrable, now compromised by a human weapon that shouldn't have existed yet. "Explain," he demanded. "They're not just copying our technology," NextRA's data tendrils flickered anxiously. "They're improving it. That destroyer's shields failed because the humans identified a resonance frequency we never knew existed. They're seeing flaws in our designs that we've overlooked for centuries." In orbit, human satellites once thought primitive were now broadcasting complex interference patterns that disrupted Kraxan targeting systems. On the ground, civilian vehicles had been retrofitted with electromagnetic weapons that could disable Kraxan ground forces. Even their internet, that basic communication network, had been transformed into a vast distributed computing system that could crack Kraxan encryption in hours instead of years. "They're using everything," NextRA continued. "Their entertainment systems are being repurposed for military coordination. Their weather satellites are now weapons platforms. Even their children's toys are being converted into drone swarms. A tactical officer interrupted with urgent news. Supreme Commander, we've lost contact with the entire Southern Fleet. The humans, they've somehow turned our own quantum communications network against us. They're not just blocking our signals, they're hijacking them. Vasix felt his scales ripple with an emotion he hadn't experienced since his youth, fear. The humans had taken 3 weeks of punishment that would have broken most civilizations, and instead of surrendering, they had learned. Adapted. Grown stronger. In a secret facility beneath the Pacific Ocean, Dr. James Rodriguez led a team that had made perhaps the most dangerous breakthrough of all. They had cracked the code of Kraxan neural interfaces, the technology that allowed the alien invaders to directly connect with their ships. Their system is based on a hierarchical structure, Rodriguez explained to military leaders worldwide. They never considered that it could be decentralized, democratic. They don't just share information, they impose it. But we can do better. The humans began deploying their own neural interface systems, but with a crucial difference. Where Kraxan systems were rigid and top-down, human interfaces were flexible and collaborative. Pilots could share experiences instantly, learn from each other's mistakes and successes in real time. Supreme Commander, Nexare's voice was barely a whisper now. They're not just fighting back. They're innovating faster than we can adapt. Our technological advantage is disappearing. In the skies above Earth, something unprecedented was happening. Human fighters, once hopelessly outmatched, were now engaging Kraxan ships on equal terms. Their pilots, linked through their new neural networks, fought with both individual creativity and collective intelligence. But perhaps most terrifying of all was what the humans had done with the captured Kraxan FTL technology. They hadn't just understood it, they had reimagined it. In secret shipyards around the world, they were building vessels that combined Kraxan principles with human ingenuity. They're not meant to do this, Vasix muttered, watching another display of human adaptation. They're supposed to be primitive. Weak. Easy to conquer. Perhaps, Nexare suggested carefully, we should consider withdrawal. We could return with a larger fleet, with new strategies. No. Vasix's roar echoed through the command center. The Kraxan Empire does not retreat. We are superior. We will crush these humans, no matter what it takes. But even as he spoke those words, alerts began blaring throughout the Eternal Dominion. Human ships were appearing from quantum tunnels that shouldn't have existed. Their weapons were piercing Kraxan shields with precision that spoke of intimate knowledge of the technology. The humans hadn't just learned to fight back, they had learned to fight better. And as Vasix watched his carefully planned invasion crumble in the face of human ingenuity, he began to understand a terrible truth: the Kraxan Empire had chosen the wrong species to underestimate. The real war was just beginning. The first human quantum strike came without warning. One moment, the Kraxan orbital defense grid was intact. The next, 30% of it simply ceased to exist, destroyed by weapons that emerged from impossibly precise quantum tunnels directly inside their shields. Supreme Commander Vasix stared at the tactical display in disbelief. How? He demanded. How are they targeting our ships through quantum space? They've. Nexare's data tendrils had faded to an ashen gray. They've somehow mapped quantum space, Supreme Commander. Not just mapped it, they're manipulating it in ways our scientists thought impossible. Dr. Sarah Chen's voice echoed through hijacked Kraxan communication channels. Did you think quantum space was only good for travel? Every dimension is a weapon, if you're creative enough. The human counteroffensive had begun, and it was unlike anything the Kraxan had ever faced. Earth's improvised fleet moved like a swarm of insects, but each ship demonstrated a level of coordination that shouldn't have been possible. They attacked from multiple quantum vectors simultaneously, their neural-linked pilots operating with both individual brilliance and collective intelligence. Supreme Commander, a tactical officer reported, their ships, they're not just copying our technology. They're using principles we never considered. They're combining quantum tunneling with their primitive nuclear weapons, creating spatial disruptions that. The officer's voice trailed off as another Kraxan battlecruiser imploded, torn apart by a weapon that turned space itself into a weapon. In the skies above Earth, the battle had transformed. Human fighters darted between quantum pockets, appearing and disappearing faster than Kraxan targeting systems could track. Their weapons were hybrid abominations, combinations of Kraxan technology and human improvisation that defied conventional military doctrine. "They're not fighting fair," Vazix snarled, watching another squadron of his ships fall to human ingenuity. "No, Supreme Commander," Nexare agreed. "They're fighting to win." The humans had turned their entire planet into a weapon. Their satellite network, once considered primitive, now formed a complex quantum detection grid. Their ground-based installations fired weapons that rode the boundaries between normal space and quantum dimensions. Even their civilian infrastructure had been weaponized. Every computer, every network node became part of a vast battle coordination system. But it was the solar gambit, as humans would later call it, that truly demonstrated their terrifying potential. Using their newly developed quantum technology, they initiated a controlled solar flare, directing it through precisely calculated quantum tunnels. The stream of plasma, guided by human ingenuity and powered by their own star, struck the heart of the Kraxan fleet. "Impossible!" Vazix roared as he watched a quarter of his remaining ships vanish in the artificial solar storm. "They're weaponizing a star. They're surviving," Nexare finished quietly. "By any means necessary." The battle for Earth's orbit had become a desperate fight for survival, not for the humans, but for the Kraxan. Every tactic they had used for centuries of conquest was being turned against them. Every technological advantage they had relied upon was being neutralized or surpassed. In the command center of humanity's unified defense force, Dr. Rodriguez watched the battle unfold through the neural interface network. "They never understood," he commented to his colleagues. "Technology isn't about having the biggest guns or the strongest shields. It's about imagination. Innovation. The willingness to try the impossible." The Kraxan fleet, once seemingly invincible, was being systematically dismantled. Human ships, crude but effective, swarmed through quantum space like digital antibodies attacking an infection. Their weapons, born from desperate innovation, struck with devastating precision. "Supreme Commander," Nexare's voice was heavy with defeat, "we've lost 60% of our fleet. Our remaining ships are reporting critical systems failures across all spectrums. The humans, they're not just defeating us. They're taking our technology apart piece by piece, improving it, and using it against us." Vazix stood silent, watching his invasion force crumble. The humans had done more than just survive, they had evolved. In mere weeks, they had taken centuries of Kraxan technological development and transformed it into something new, something terrifying. As another wave of human ships emerged from quantum tunnels, their hybrid weapons ready to fire, Vazix finally understood the true nature of strength. It wasn't about superior technology or military might. It was about adaptation, innovation, and the indomitable will to survive. The Kraxan Empire had started this war believing they were the supreme power in the galaxy. Now, as their ships fell one by one to human ingenuity, they faced a horrifying reality: they had awakened something far more dangerous than any enemy they had ever faced. They had awakened humanity's potential. Supreme Commander Vazix stood alone on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, watching as the last remnants of his mighty fleet burned in Earth's orbit. The holographic displays showed a battle that had become a rout, but not in the way he had imagined when this invasion began. "Supreme Commander," Nexare's voice came through damaged communication systems, "the humans have surrounded us. They're offering terms for surrender." Vazix's scales shifted to the deep crimson of rage. "The Kraxan Empire does not surrender. We have conquered 12 galaxies. We have had conquered," a human voice interrupted, Dr. Sarah Chen, speaking perfect Kraxan language through their own communication systems. Your empire is already falling, Supreme Commander. Earth wasn't your only mistake. The tactical displays suddenly expanded, showing dozens of Kraxan-controlled systems across the galaxy. In each one, subjected species were rising up, armed with the same hybrid technology that humans had developed. Earth hadn't just defended itself, it had become a beacon of resistance. You see, Dr. Rodriguez's voice joined the channel. While you were focused on crushing our military, we were sharing our breakthroughs with every species you've oppressed. Turns out, we're pretty good at teaching others how to fight back. Vasix watched in horror as reports flooded in from across Kraxan space. Their supposedly unbreakable neural networks had been turned into highways of rebellion. Their quantum communication systems now carried the seeds of revolution. Every piece of Kraxan technology they had used to maintain control was being turned against them. Your greatest mistake, Chen continued, wasn't attacking Earth. It was assuming that technological superiority equals actual superiority. We humans have spent our entire history learning from our enemies, adapting their strengths, and overcoming our weaknesses. The Eternal Dominion shuddered as human ships maintained their siege positions. Their weapons, a terrifying fusion of Earth ingenuity and reversed-engineered Kraxan technology, stood ready to fire. Look at your ship's sensors, Rodriguez suggested. Really look at what we've done with your technology. We haven't just copied it, we've reimagined it. Every system, every weapon, every defense, we saw possibilities you never considered. Nexaray's data tendrils had gone completely white, a sign of total submission in Kraxan biology. Supreme Commander, they've won. Not just here. Everywhere. Our empire, it's over. Vasix stood rigid, his 4 eyes fixed on the tactical displays. Humans hadn't just defeated his invasion force, they had completely transformed the galaxy's balance of power in mere weeks. Their quantum technology had already spread to dozens of worlds. Their neural interface systems had become the backbone of an interstellar resistance. You laughed at us, Chen's voice was calm, almost gentle. Called us primitive. Weak. But strength isn't about having the most advanced technology. It's about what you do with what you have. It's about innovation, adaptation, and most importantly, cooperation. The final blow to Vasix's pride came when his own crew began laying down their weapons. They had seen enough. The humans had proven themselves not just capable warriors, but something far more dangerous, capable teachers. They had taken the Kraxan Empire's greatest strengths and taught others how to overcome them. The terms are simple, Rodriguez announced. Immediate withdrawal from all conquered territories. Full technological disclosure to aid in restoration efforts. And a binding agreement to never again mistake technological inequality for species inferiority. As Vasix watched his empire crumble, he finally understood the true lesson of this catastrophic invasion. The humans hadn't just defeated the Kraxan, they had evolved beyond them. In trying to crush what they saw as a primitive species, the Kraxan had instead catalyzed humanity's greatest leap forward. The galaxy is changing, Chen declared. The age of empire is over. We're establishing something new, an interstellar coalition of equals. Every species contributing their unique perspectives, their innovations, their creativity. In the end, Supreme Commander Vasix, last leader of the Kraxan Empire, did something none of his predecessors had ever done. He surrendered. Not just to superior force, but to superior vision. The humans hadn't just won a war, they had transformed the very nature of interstellar civilization. As the formal surrender was transmitted across quantum channels to every corner of the galaxy, Earth emerged not as another conquered world, but as the birthplace of a new era. Humanity had proven that true strength lies not in technological superiority, but in the endless capacity to learn, adapt, and grow. The stars themselves seemed to shine brighter that day, witnessing the dawn of a new age, one born not from conquest, but from the indomitable spirit of a species that refused to be underestimated.